Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Georgina Komar, and this is video 4 in the Fearless Investors series. And I'm excited about today because I love the sub-personality style work that we're about to go through. And just quickly, we're going to be looking at 4 sub-personality styles and their investment strengths and weaknesses. In the last video, we talked about how we are made up of these separate sub-personalities that we learn to see and identify. Once we've learned to see and identify these sub-personalities, not 4, we've got many sub-personalities, we start to take control of our choice-making mechanisms. We start to see the parts that drive the behaviors that undermine our investing results, and we start to see the sub-personalities or the parts of the personality that support us in creating the investment results that we want. And this is just part and parcel of developing emotional intelligence and the ability to self-regulate the way we behave and act as investors. Now, the 4 sub-personality styles, this makes this whole process easy. So it's one of the quick ways we teach this work. When you deepen into it, you want to know about all the different sub-personalities, but you'll soon find that as we move into today, this is a very quick way of understanding self and how you behave as an investor or in other areas of life. Georgina, anything you want to say about that before
Hi everyone. Sub-personality styles are one of my favorite aspects of helping to introduce people to the work that we do, because we all will fit into one predominantly, sometimes 2, sometimes even 3 of the sub-personality styles, depending on what situation that we're in. But we'll as we go through, you'll start to understand and see that you have specific sub-personality styles and sub-personalities that fit within them that actually are running things when you're doing your investments.
Thanks, Georgina.
So we'll just actually also talk a little bit about the fact that you can have more than one predominant sub-personality style. We can have what we would call blends. So when we go through and set out the answers to the quiz that will help you determine your sub-personality style, the results may show that you have a high percentage of, say, Evaluator sub-personality style, and you may also have a percentage of Trailblazer and perhaps Motivator. So we're not really just fitting into one part or one sub-personality style. We often, depending on the situation, can have a blend.
Yeah, I've seen every one of these sub-personality styles within my own body mind, my own consciousness. But predominantly, I operate out of 2 styles. And most people will find that they'll identify 2 styles really easily. Maybe a 3rd style, you'll see it won't be as dominant. And on the rare occasion, we'll see someone, and we've got someone working for us, our operations manager, who has all 4 blends, all 4 styles in pretty much equal amounts. So just quickly to set this up as an example, I will always display predominantly Motivator traits or Trailblazer traits. And I can also dip into Evaluator traits fairly often. And around my wife, who I'm scared of, I go into Stabiliser traits. Georgina, just to set it up, what? She's a Trailblazer. No, I'm joking, but you know what I mean. What would you see predominantly in you, Georgina?
Well, of course, as I said, it just depends. I would say from an investment perspective, I would have a very strong evaluator. I have a strong stabilizer and motivator when it comes to working with people. Those are my 3 predominant, but I would say from an investment perspective, it definitely would be my evaluators, my strongest sub-personality style.
Yeah, like what I would notice with you, Georgina, is you'll be in motivator when you're just in social situations, hanging out with people, and evaluator when you'll be at work and you've got important decisions to make.
Yeah, of course. The motivator actually also plays an important part in my working role when I'm coaching clients.
Of course, relationship building.
Yep. Yep, definitely. And the stabilizer.
Yep. Okay. So I'll kick off, and we're going to be talking about a motivator and how to recognize a motivator and the strengths and weaknesses of the motivator. The motivator, again, is a predominant style of mine, so I know it pretty well, but I'm going to hand this next slide over to you to go through it. Let's have a little bit of a chit-chat about the motivator.
Sure.
How you spot them? How do you spot them, Georgina?
Well, when I'm in my motivator, or when you meet someone who is pretty outgoing, talkative, really friendly, expressive, demonstrative in their actions, they'll touch you, they move their hands, sort of like what I'm doing now. They're usually quite casual and relaxed, very enthusiastic, can be very persuasive. They can tell stories that can capture your attention and take you on a bit of a journey. So they're very inspiring in that way. However, do you want to talk at the last point there, Perry, about some of the not so great aspects of the motivator subpersonality style?
Yeah, the first thing that we notice is that they're never on time, and they'll have sloppy attention to details. So you can see, again, if we just mirror what Georgina said, very sort of, it's about fun, it's about helping people feel warm, it's about being positive. They're very happy and they help people feel welcome. But they're so focused on, it's almost external things all the time about, they get caught up in story, etc., etc., that they don't tend to plan, which is why they're never on time, or they get caught up and forget. So that's definitely how you spot a motivator. They're on time.
Yeah, and one of the things about the subpersonality styles, and I'll just mention that here, and the motivator is one of two orientations that we find with the subpersonality styles. The motivator and the stabilizer are actually very people oriented. So they're really connecting, and they're really, really strong in building relationships, where the Evaluator and the Trailblazer are more task focused and more task oriented. So with the motivator, because they're people oriented, they don't really care about, that's why they don't care about the details or being on time, because that is not a priority for them. For them, it's all about connection and being in contact with people and persuading them and telling them stories. And frankly, they really love the limelight.
Yeah, very relational. As Georgina said, it's all about relating. If a motivator goes to a restaurant and they have a great meal, or they go and tell everybody, or if they go to a movie, so they're constantly selling. And they're not selling because they're trying to get anything out of it. They're just selling because they want other people to have good experiences.
Exactly.
Very good orators, by the way, and they get lots of ideas very, very quickly. So you're probably getting a picture of this type of person. When we start to look at the subpersonality makeup of the motivator, we're going to see the social butterfly subpersonality. That's a subpersonality that's a flit around and chat to people. We're going to see the creator subpersonality, this part that has lots of ideas. And under the line, what we talk about when we talk about unconscious territory, they have a vulnerable subpersonality, so they're typically afraid of rejection. So the social butterfly works to get them really liked. Well, they want to keep people happy, but at the same time, they're benefiting themselves when they get people to like them, because they get to avoid ever feeling rejected. So when we start to look at their strengths as investors, Georgina, what do we see?
Yeah, well, the motivators, as I said, because they're so into connecting with people, they are amazing in their networking ability. It's a major strength for them. If you've got to be pulling deals together or working with contractors, you would know how important it is to build positive and strong relationships. So the motivator subpersonality really helps you to shine in those areas.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed, Georgina, sorry to interrupt, but one of the things that I noticed is that some of the best property developers that I work with have a high amount of motivator, and they use that in their team building and communicating with others. Sorry, handing it back to you.
Yeah, definitely. One of my clients in results actually has done amazing with his portfolio because of his motivator. He really taps into helping people to understand that what they have to say and what they contribute is important, and that connection is really helpful for him. Also, they have an ability to comprehend investing concepts and strategies very quickly. They're creative. They have lots of ideas that come up for them because they do connect with a lot of people, and they are inspired and inspiring because of their ability to just tap into what's going on for them, and just they give things a go, as you've said there on the slide. They go with their gut a lot. They don't analyze things too much because it's all a feeling nature and a relational nature as far as the motivators go.
Yeah, which is going to tie back into their weaknesses as investors in a moment. But yeah, that last part, give it a go, gut feeling about things. Out of all the profiles, the motivator is probably the fastest one to get concepts really quickly. So, if there's a new investing concept or a new way of doing things, the motivator will just get a real sense of what you're talking about or what they're reading about extremely quickly. It's like lightning fast. Oh yeah, I get it. And so some of you listening to this will know that you're a motivator because you've got that feeling. Oh, I get it. Where if you're another profile, you're trying to think your way. You're trying to think to learn. Motivators have very strong conceptual understanding. So potential areas of improvement, as Georgina said, they follow their gut. They do things because it feels good. And I'm actually going to quickly share a story, Georgina, about a results client that sort of highlights this. So this particular client, she bought a property, and because she is a motivator, and I want to share this because it sort of ties back into some of those traits we said before, but I think people are going to get a real sense of how a motivator looks at investment through the story. She buys a property, and she starts to put her property development team together, and she's doing that really, really well because she can build relationships. She loves connecting. She loves sharing. She loves working within a team. Then she turns her attention to the property. And when she looks at the property, she's like, oh, this is going to look so beautiful. You know what I'm going to do now? I can just see that if I paint this wall this color, it's going to be amazing. And you know what? We're going to renovate the backyard. And it's just going to look absolutely incredible. And you can see the sort of passion that I'm bringing to this. An evaluator's not going to do that, by the way. They're not going to bring this passion to it. So you can see it's all feeling based. It's excited about what she's creating and the experience the tenants are going to have. Okay? Not once did she look at the cost of things or evaluate it from a perspective of, okay, if I spend this much renovating the property, this is the downfall at the end of it financially. And so that would be a typical motivator approach, which is all about looks and feeling rather than coming back. And let's get locked into the maths. Let's get locked into it. Let's really evaluate this from purely a mathematical perspective. And you can see why as we start to dig down into these challenges, they potentially miss small details or slop in checking legalities and contracts, etc. Because, Georgina, how does a motivator feel when they've got to pore through a contract?
Oh God, it's the last thing that they want to do. They just go with their energy and the inspiration of all the things that make them excited. And certainly going through a contract is boring. I don't want to do it. Let someone else look at it.
Yep, and here's another one. If you've got to do maths for 2 hours, meaning you've got to double check the finances on a property, how does a motivator feel?
Forget it. They don't want to have anything to do. They'll procrastinate. They'll go off for a coffee, call someone up and see what else they can do in creating relationships.
Correct, because it's not creative. It's not creative
No.
and it's not fun and it's not relating to people. So they'll tend to feel like, or get angry or what have you. They just don't want to do it. It's not a natural tendency. So, of course, that comes into potentially lack planning skills and project management skills. In fact, I would say out of all the profiles, the motivator is just by far the worst at planning and project management skills.
Yeah, the thing about the motivator is if they can coerce or they can connect with someone and get them to do it for them, that's a winning combination. But they still, the investor, the motivating investor still needs to understand what's going on in order to be able to make the right decisions without just winging it.
Yeah, look, you've just said a really important thing. A lot of times everybody listening and watching this is not about even working on your weaknesses. Even I think you need to be very aware of and maybe improve them a bit. Oftentimes it's about bringing people onto your team that counteract your weaknesses. So as an example, on that example I shared before, I suggested that she brings on a financial advisor to double check everything that she was doing. And she went, well, that's a very good idea. So he would have had a large amount of Evaluator, which we'll get into soon, and counterbalanced her weaknesses as a motivator. Just quickly in finishing this off, I potentially find it hard to follow a system. They'd rather wing it. Now, I want to just sort of dig into this. It's quite important. So what happens with certain investment styles as we start to analyze them, sub-personality styles and the way they approach investing, they'll create a system or get into a system and they'll just follow that system for years, which can be a great way of doing things, because once you've got a system that works, why not keep doing it? It can have its problems too, which we'll be talking about when we work with another style. But this motivator style, they'll start to get a system and then think, oh, well, this is boring. Because could be making money and they've got some other idea. And so one of the problems with the motivator is that they'll follow their feelings, want to be excited rather than follow a system or stick with the system. As you can see, that ties into the last one, prefer excitement over boredom. And again, just quickly, I've worked with clients who prefer excitement over boredom, and they'll often find that they're attracted to dramatic investing opportunities that give them a lot of kick, rather than, again, being safe, because something in them just wants to be involved with exciting things rather than safe and secure things.
Yeah, also known as chaos and instability and panic,
Yep.
And all kinds of really highly feeling-oriented experiences.
Correct. Georgina, couple here for you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Potentially, they can be very sloppy in their communication. In other words, because they're not detail-oriented, they can express or give information that's not accurate because they don't bother to check it. So that's one of the disadvantages. And they also have a potential dislike for research, as we talked about, wanting to plow through figures or spend lots of time reading contracts. Because it's not fun, it's boring, it could be a big disadvantage for them because they miss out on the necessary knowledge and the expertise that they gain from going through that process. So even if they actually assign it to someone else, it is something that they're missing out on. So it is one of those areas that if motivators can, start to build that muscle of doing a bit more of the research, it will really serve them in good stead.
Yep, great. Thanks, Georgina. Okay, now we're going to go into how to spot a trailblazer. I'll hand this over to you, Georgina, this next.
Because the Trailblazer is my least, the least subpersonality style that I have of the four.
Yeah,
yes,
and who has it the most?
And you're highest, so for sure.
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting used to working with Trailblazers.
You're around them a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so Trailblazers, very loud and really to the point. They're very decisive. They take charge. They can be rude, interrupt. You've probably seen Perry try it already a couple of times. Very blunt. The results, they're never getting the results fast enough. They want things done yesterday. They're very demanding and can be quite competitive in wanting to achieve things and get there first. And they have no issue with conflict. They're there for the fight. They'll embrace conflict and probably get a real kick out of it.
Yep, there's just quickly. Yep, I agree with everything there. I've been working with Paula for many, many years, and for those that don't know, Paula works with us. She does she's basically my good technical assistant and really helps me out a lot. She's worked with us for years, but for about the last 2 years, I've worked with her really closely. And in that time, I'm working with someone that's probably got just as much D as me, maybe a little bit less. No, she's got as much D as me when she's, Trailblazer, D, and disc profiling, but as me, fairly full bore with it. And what's fascinating is that her and I can be having a discussion that from the outside looks like an argument to everybody else. She's short with me, she's rude with me, she would even swear at me, and I would do the same. And there is absolutely not one bit of personal offense taken. We both within 2 seconds, because even when we're angry, even when we're playing that role out, it's not personally towards her. And even with Anne-Marie, my Anne-Marie has a Trailblazer. So sometimes there's conversations between Anne-Marie, Paula, and myself, which are extremely robust. Everyone leaves that experience with no sense of anger towards the other person. And that's what happens with Trailblazers. But it's probably important to say that Trailblazers can handle Trailblazers, but we will find that no other profile could handle that form of interaction. So I really want to say, because it's important, I've just shared that I'm okay talking to my Trailblazers in that way, and my Trailblazers are really happy to talk to me in that way because we are okay with that. Okay, so I would do my best not to communicate that way in general to the other profiles, because if I'm running a team and I'm communicating to the other profiles in that way, they won't handle it, because every other profile actually dislikes conflict. Now, when we say the Trailblazer likes conflict or embraces conflict, some Trailblazers enjoy conflict because they realize it's a way of making change. It's a way of getting their point across, or they just enjoy the emotional intensity of conflict. Others don't like conflict. Other Trailblazers don't like conflict, but they'll always be able to use assertiveness or aggressiveness in conflicting situations because it's just true to their nature.
Yeah, and Para, I'll just add, because I had mentioned it before, with the Motivator being a really people-oriented subpersonality style. As I mentioned, the Trailblazer is a very task-focused. It really doesn't care about relationships. It wants to focus on the task and getting the task done quickly.
Yep. And so just to get a real sense of this, I've got a huge motivator. Anyone that spends time with me knows I've got a huge motivator, and I've got a huge Trailblazer. So the conflict would look like this. I could be out really socializing and connecting to people, and then my Trailblazer's going, hey, you got to get back to work. You got this stuff to get done. You got to get that done. And if I'm in my Trailblazer and people are trying to connect with me or communicate with me, and I've got these tasks to do, I'm off people. I don't want to be around people. Okay, so that's how these types of profiles show up within systems. Georgina, I'll give this one to you as well.
So there are many more subpersonality styles that make up the Trailblazer style, but three of the top ones are, the first one is the achiever subpersonality. So the Trailblazer is always wanting to be able to tick those boxes to get things done quickly. And so the achiever is quite dominant, a subpersonality for the Trailblazer, as is the warrior. As Perry mentioned, there's no fear of conflict, and it's all about moving forward and instigating change and making sure things grow and move. And those are really fascinating and really positive subpersonality styles to have, especially within your investing, because you just keep going. There's not a lot of emotion. In fact, as you can see in those two, there really isn't any emotion involved. Now, the area where they can sometimes have challenges is that they're in their the opposite aspect in the Trailblazer is that they're very vulnerable. Part of the Trailblazer has such assertiveness and such drive in order to sort of protect this vulnerable part of themselves. So they're extremely afraid of failure, and as a result will really push to achieve and to fight to get the results that they're looking for, so that they don't have to feel this failure.
A lot of movies are made about the Trailblazer, you know, like movies about sort of corporate America or banking or investing, where you see that real high-powered person who doesn't care about others, and they're just totally about status and achieving, and they're willing to fight. That's movies made about the Trailblazer.
Yeah.
So when we start to look at their investment strengths, they've got a great ability to act, the courage to pull the trigger. So typically what you'll see with Trailblazers is they have a lot of courage because of that warrior sub-personality. Now, by the way, that ability to act, the courage to pull the trigger, even though we're looking at it now as an asset, we'll soon see that it can be its opposite. Okay? They tend to maintain focus on investment goals at all times. Trailblazers are very focused because of that warrior and achiever sub-personality that makes up this profile. They just keep going no matter how tough it is. Very resilient towards goals. They accept risk. So it's probably important to say that if you're a Trailblazer, you can't stand a life with no risk. You actually seek out risk because there's some requirement within your psyche to embrace challenge. It doesn't mean it all the time, but Trailblazers will look for risk. They can make decisions fast and under time pressure. So if they've got to make a decision within an hour on a property, they can do it. And they will do it. Again, like the Motivator, very fast conceptually. So they grab concepts and strategies quickly. So I suppose if you start to look at the overall picture of the Trailblazer as an investor, it is that total dedication to going, and I'm going to use the word, they're going to go big, right? They're going to try to go big because that's just how they orientate. The other aspect about the Trailblazer is they learn by doing. So they'll just get in and do it. That's typically how they learn. And again, the benefit of that is they get going quicker than a lot of other profiles. So they'll go, okay, I want to do this. It could be, they're in a job they don't like, and they'll quickly make the move into investor because that's just how they are. They're willing to take that risk. But what they'll do is they'll tend to, as we move into the weaknesses, you'll start to see this, they may not know enough. And they can get in trouble because they'll tend to move before they know enough, as an example, which can be a good thing. So you can start to see with these profiles, they've got their functional and dysfunctional side. So the potential areas of improvement, I'm going to hand this one to Georgina.
Yep, potentially. When they're under pressure, they can rush in their decision-making process, and they may miss out on details because there's a lot of adrenaline running through a Trailblazer when they're under pressure and they're wanting to make decisions. They're not afraid of it, but it's actually moving through them, and they may not be able to focus in enough on the details. It can allow them to take too many uncalculated risks because they get so used to the risk factor and what it feels like that it's almost as if there is no fear. So they can continue to keep taking those risks without it having any impact on them. The other thing often is that they're too rushed to analyze the details and to plan the projects effectively. Again, fitting back into the lack of concern of details and taking risks with even minimum information in order to meet that deadline or in order to achieve that goal.
Yep. So someone with a huge Trailblazer in them, I constantly have to be aware of slowing down and making sure that what I'm doing is analysed effectively, thought about. I've got to go into the details or have someone that can check the details for me and work through. That's an ongoing work on for me. And that's one of the things you learn about your profile. There's ongoing work-ons because you have these weaknesses that need to be seen and worked with. As I said, you can have other people come in if it's an area of weakness, but you still pretty much won't get away without going, okay, this is my area of my weakness. I've got to do some work on this, even if I've got someone else to cover that off.
And I was going to say, it's important to say maybe at this point that all of these subpersonality styles have their functional and their dysfunctional aspects, and none of them are better than the other. They all have strengths and weaknesses, and it's really key that when you start to determine what your subpersonality style is, that you just accept it for where it is and how you can move with it. That awareness of knowing isn't to make you feel guilty or bad about the things that you may judge as wrong as far as one of the subpersonality styles go, but just that awareness so that we can be conscious and move in a way that's going to utilize our strengths and minimize whatever the weaknesses are that we have.
Great. Awesome. Impatient and overconfident. So again, we sort of covered off that impatience bit, which drives them not to check details, but overconfident. Again, as I said earlier, I mentioned that, the Trailblazers, yeah, I'll give it a go. I've got the ability to do that, and they may not. I'm just going to finish this off with a quick client story, Georgina. Someone we've both worked with, you predominantly, high Trailblazer, purchased a business. This is an investor as well, that purchases business that he has a partner in. And his partner had told him, okay, if you purchase this particular business in this particular area, you're going to do these kind of figures. Anyway, purchased it, and within 2 months, it wasn't returning those figures and didn't come close. And he came in and talked to me. And I said, well, what gave you the idea that you could achieve those figures in the first place? And he said, my business partner told me that. And I said, well, what did he base that assumption on? Anyway, just that question, what did he base that assumption on? There was no response. There was no answer. And that's just a perfect example. If they'd done the research before they purchased the property, detailed analytical research, this property, the / business that they purchased, they wouldn't have purchased it if they'd done the detailed analysis work. Okay, how to spot a stabilizer. Now, what's kind of interesting, by the way, as I see the way we're moving through this, we've just worked with 2 profiles that are probably conceptually strong and more have a sort of a greater ability to go, okay, take risks, and it's more about excitement. We're now starting to look at 2 profiles that are fairly opposite to that. So, Georgina.
Yes, well, the Stabiliser, as you said, Perry, the previous 2 were more about going out and being out and taking risks. This Stabiliser and the next one we'll cover, the Evaluator, are very concerned about safety orientation, and so they're quite risk averse. So the Stabiliser, I love the Stabiliser. They actually are a really good balance to the Motivator, because the Motivator is the storyteller and wants to connect, and the Stabiliser is the perfect subpersonality style for the Motivator to connect with, because the Stabiliser is, as I mentioned before, a people orientation or a relationship orientated subpersonality style, but they're not the talkers, they're the listeners. So they can sit and listen to the Motivators, and they make the Motivators feel very stable and secure. They don't like to impose their thoughts or their feelings on someone else. They're quite reserved. They're very sensitive to others' needs. They're very caring. They're very supportive. They're loyal. They really, one of the things they strive for is harmony. They dislike conflict. And they're going to look for ways to create harmony. It will, usually it ends up that they have quite a stable and a monotone aspect to their voice so that it makes people feel comfortable. They're not up and all over the place like a motivator might be wanting to inspire. They're actually wanting to do the opposite. They're wanting people to feel really safe and secure and calm, because that's when they do their best work.
Yep, sorry, Georgina.
Okay. I was going to say I was just going to cover the last point. So they are actually quite uncomfortable in being the center of attention in a group, because they're not looking to express and be heard. They're there to listen. So they're really, really good in one-on-one situations. You can feel really safe and really understood when you're having a one-on-one conversation with a stabilizer.
Yep. So if you met a stabilizer, you'll never see them being like this, yeah, or like a trailblazer. It's all about fitting in to the environment and keeping everyone's emotional piece in place. They are very sensitive to others' feelings, so they don't want to hurt other people. They don't want to be hurt. So they move in a particular way in the world with others. As Georgina said, these subpersonality styles are made up of many different subpersonalities, but the three very noticeable subpersonalities in the stabiliser are the carer nurturer subpersonality. This is why they're, from a career perspective, stabilisers are usually very good as nurses, as counsellors, as beauty therapists, as anything to do with caring for people. The people pleaser subpersonality, so the people pleaser subpersonality wants them to keep other people happy and give them good things, and that can be functional or dysfunctional, but will become dysfunctional when they try to please others so they don't feel rejected, or they're afraid of, expressing their truth or their own viewpoints because they're worried that someone else might disagree with them or be offended. That's when it tends to become dysfunctional. And the vulnerable subpersonalities, they're afraid of instability, meaning, and this is probably really important to say because I'm actually going to use a couple of investing examples in a moment, the stabiliser subpersonality is, out of all the subpersonalities, is the most afraid of change. And if they end up in a system that's working for them, even if it's only performing, a little bit, and someone comes along with a better system, and even if that system's got lots of proof that it's better and going to make them more money, they'll tend to want to stick with the system they know. That's typical stabiliser approach to not only investing but life and business.
Resistance. First cab off the rank for a stabilizer is resistance. If it's not broken, why do we need to fix it? Even if it could be better or more efficient, but it's okay the way that it is. Resistant.
A funny thing, Georgina, if I'm working with Paula sometimes, if she's in Trailblazer, so again, Paula works a lot with our technology and software. If she's in Trailblazer and I say, hey, look, I'm looking at shifting to this software because of she goes, within 2 minutes, she looks at, oh, yeah, that's real good. If she's in Stabiliser, which she has a lot of, I'll introduce the new software and right away, it's just resistance. She doesn't even want to really look at it. And it becomes as simple as that. And this is one of the great things about when you understand these profiles. You're working with people on your team, as an investor or in business or any other area of life with your family, and you quickly see what profile they're in. And the moment you know what profile they're in, you know how they orientate, how they're highly likely to act. And then you can respond better.
So the strengths that help stable investors who are stabilizer subpersonalities are they have a real sense of calmness, and they're really steady. So they're really quite it's not chaotic. It's stable. They follow the rules. They're really good with following the rules because it helps keep them safe. It helps keep them with their feet on the ground. They don't have an overly inflated sense of self. It's not all about them. It's about the harmony, and it's about achieving what needs to be achieved together. It's a real relational subpersonality style. They're full of common sense. So they'll look at things from a real practical perspective. And they don't get too emotional about it. And, as Perry said, if there's something that has, an aspect of change, then they can get emotional. But in the take change out of the scenario, and they're usually really even-tempered. But also as a result of their desire to feel safe and not like things to change quickly, they can be slow to make decisions. They're the complete opposite of the Trailblazer, and they want to take the time to feel into their decisions. It's not all about achieving it. It's making sure that the decisions that are made are going to end up feeling good and everyone's going to be happy.
Yep. So as an example, thanks for that, Georgina. As an example, what will happen, a stabilizer would join someone like results mentoring, and the stabilizer will slowly and methodically work their way through the study, and then they start to use a system. And once they start to understand the system or their system of investing, and they start to have some wins with that system, they will stick to that system. And they will become extremely comfortable in that system. So I'm sure everyone can see there's real strengths in that compared to the Motivator or the Trailblazer, who, might be, wow, I'm sick of this. Let's go do something else. I'm sick of it. Let's go do something else. So they're very grounded and methodical. Potential areas of improvement. I'm going to quickly share a story before I whip through this slide, because I think it will really highlight it. I work with an investor who had the same financial advisor and accountant for 35 years, and he had got that accountant and financial advisor from his father. And the father had been involved with not only the financial advisor and the accountant, but the same firm, and his father before. So the father's father had been involved with this firm. And that was a stabilizing family. So it was a family full of stabilizers. So you could see they just stayed with this one firm through 3 generations. And they were involved in results. And results were giving them these new strategies and new ways of making more money from property development. But of course, the accountant and financial advisor that had been with for years were saying, no, don't do that, even though it all stacked up. Now, can you see, Georgina, that's a typical stabilizer story, isn't it?
For sure. Definitely. Don't rock the boat. If it's not broken, why fix it?
Yep. And so, to be honest, they missed out on hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. That probably slowed down their retirement by 10 or 15 years because they just had this system. It made a little bit of money. But it sort of worked in its own small way, and everyone else around them within results doing really, really well because they're taking on some of these new strategies. But they were like, no, I don't want to. It's too risky. It's too risky. It's too risky. That's a typical stabilizer. So, as you can see here, potentially you resist new ideas and take a long time to adjust to change, even when change is required. Potentially you find it hard to do more than one thing at once, and to do things fast or make quick decisions under time pressure. Stabilizers hate time pressure. If a stabilizer asks to make a decision that's got a risk profile, if they're going to make a decision within an hour, they will choke. They just won't. They won't be able to make that decision. They potentially lack confidence. Out of all the profiles, they probably display what you might consider a humbleness, leading into a little bit of self-doubt or low self-worth. Sort of, you'll notice those things about them. They're like, maybe I'm not good enough, which gives them, by the way, makes them very attractive because they do come across as very humble, real people. They can miss out on opportunities because they're very slow to make decisions.
That's right. Stable, but there's the cost of being too stable.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, if you look at what we've been through today, you'll see that each profile, the profile has what we call assets, but those very same assets become risks unless they're managed. So as an example, quickly, an asset of the Trailblazer, going to make decisions fast and just do it anyway. Okay, that's an asset, but that also falls into a risk profile. I'm sure you can all see that. Okay, Stabiliser, same thing. I'm going to get a system, I'm going to stick with that system once it's working. Asset, but becomes a liability, again, when that becomes the only way of moving. The Stabiliser can be sloppy with details, and they need to learn to take more risks. That pushes against their need for stability. Now, by the way, never take risk, not real risk. Like we talk about risk. Risk is minimized through logical analysis. Georgina, we're going to work with an evaluator. Do you know much about evaluators?
Oh yes, evaluators are my forte. Evaluator is my strongest subpersonality style, especially in the working environment.
Yep, and also, Georgina, I just want to say here quickly that you work a lot with evaluators too. A lot of evaluators love investing, and I think that predominantly you work with a lot of them, don't you? A lot of people with a strong evaluator style.
Definitely. And, there's I would say, Perry, that people who are interested in results mentoring, a good majority of them do have a strong evaluator because results gives them the information that they need to satisfy the evaluator style, because it wants evidence. It wants safety, like the Stabiliser. It wants safety as well, but its safety comes out of information and control and rules.
Great. I'm going to leave this to you.
Okay, so how to spot an evaluator. They're always checking the details. They're going to double and triple check the figures, the facts. They're going to go over plans, and then they might go over them again in case they missed something. They're going to want to know the rules related to whatever type of experience they're involved with. Contracts are really important to them, the details where everything is mapped out and laid out. They're quite reserved when they're in their evaluator style. They're only focused on what the matter at hand is. They're very professional. And quite private. They don't really want to be talking about personal subjects. When you meet an evaluator, they may shake your hand, but they're certainly not going to feel comfortable with a hug. They're, again, task-oriented subpersonality styles, not really feeling-oriented. They want to get down, like the Trailblazer, they want to get down to the facts. They don't want any touchy-feely emotional sides of it. Let's just forget the small talk and get down to business. They really want to be checking, communicating the rules and procedures. You will know, for example, if you're having a conversation with an evaluator, if you've missed something in the way that things are structured, or you've missed a rule, they're always going to correct you and help you get into line, because it's so important for their sense of safety and security in making investment decisions. In order for them to feel that safety, they need to have information. Information is the number one thing for them. So as a result, they love research. And in order to maintain and keep track of all their research, they love spreadsheets. They like efficiency, a way to keep and have easy access to the research that they've put together. They're very organized. They want to be able to access the information that they've gathered so it can help them make a decision. And I'll just finish off with evaluators know the value of time. They know how important time is. Don't waste theirs, and they'll always be on time.
5 minutes early.
I was going to say they'll be early to make sure. So you better be on time for them.
Yeah. As you were reading through that list, Georgina, it's pretty easy to see that every investor needs this profile. Now, let me be clear here, everybody. And any business person needs this profile as well. So if you're an investor and you're not strong in this profile, you're in trouble. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to develop this. You probably have to just get stronger in it, but you have to realize how not having this profile is impacting you, and you would want to employ contractors or people or staff to your investing team that have this and can double check everything that you're doing. So if you don't develop this yourself, you have to have someone on your team. As Georgina read, I just see how important this aspect is. And one last thing, a story. When I present, as you know, all over Australia, and most of the time before I present, I get my PowerPoints to someone with an evaluator who does all the double checking and makes sure there's no spelling mistakes. But from time to time, I don't have a chance to get that done because I might be on the plane working on a PowerPoint and then getting off the plane, and within an hour I'm presenting.
The Trailblazer.
Yep, the Trailblazer. Now, the moment I'm presenting, this is just fascinating, the evaluators are seeing all the grammar mistakes and the spelling mistakes. Now, once an evaluator sees the grammar mistakes and the spelling mistakes, they get more fixated on the mistakes than what I'm presenting. And at that point, their estimation of me goes downwards. They go, okay, well, if he can't spell, look at that mistake. Look at that mistake. Because perfection is extremely important to an evaluator, more so than any other profile. And they always come up to me afterwards to tell me what the spelling mistakes were, or the organizer of the event will get an email saying, oh, I noticed these things, these mistakes in Perry's slides, which is just amazing that they would go to that level to provide that truthful feedback. But they love perfection. Can you just talk about that before we move on, Georgina? Because it probably we're going to tie into some weak challenges for the evaluator. Why is perfection so important?
Well, perfection, when something is perfect, it instills a sense of safety and security within an evaluator. Those are really key things that, and so as a result, they want to have those things controlled. And if you're not going to control them, then they're going to try and teach you how to control them, or they'll control them themselves. But in the meantime, they will lose a lot of respect for people who don't have those same kind of values. So, again, they're not people oriented, they're task oriented, results oriented, achievement oriented. The perfection side of things not only helps them to feel safe, but you'll see when we get to the next slide, it can also prevent them from taking action at times, because nothing is ever perfect. They believe it should be perfect, but perfection can be a real strong diversion away from actually taking action.
A question for you, Georgina. Would it be true that maybe a belief system of an evaluator would look something like this? It would say something like, if it's not perfect, a mistake could be made. Or if it's not
Certainly.
perfect, it won't work out as I want it to. How?
Yeah, definitely. If it's not perfect, one of the other things, there's so many areas of perfection that can be involved in an investment decision, for example. So if it's not perfect, I could lose money. If it's not perfect, I could miss out on the opportunity. If it's not perfect, I could get on the bad side or the wrong side of a contractor. There's so many aspects of what's interesting, Perry, is the perfection for an evaluator normally is focused on the behavior.
Yeah, thank you. Look, you really helped clear that up, because what you're basically saying is the perfectionism is driven to make sure there's no mistake, because if there's a mistake, it could fail. Yeah, great.
Definitely.
Yeah. So the evaluator, again, as Georgina pointed out, the evaluator is made up with many sub-personalities, but here's three that you'll really notice. You won't notice the vulnerable one, because you've got to work a lot with people to understand what the vulnerabilities are. but the top two most of you will notice in a evaluator. So the first one's the compliance subpersonality. The compliance subpersonality goes, what are the rules here? If I know the rules, then I can't get in trouble. Now, if we just bring that down a little bit, that means, okay, so I'm in results mentoring as an example. I'm learning about property investment. I'm looking at that property. What are the rules that I've been given by results to evaluate that property effectively? And now I'm going to go look at the council bylaws. What are the rules? So for an evaluator, the evaluator's looking at all those rules because they want to be compliant to the rule. And the reason I just smiled before, I'm suddenly thinking of a Trailblazer, because the Trailblazers looking at the bylaws of council, and they're going to have to follow it because they don't want to make a mistake. It's going to cost them a lot. But the Trailblazers sitting there thinking, these bloody rule makers, I can't stand these rule makers, because Trailblazers hate rule makers. They've got more of a rebellious streak. So the evaluator from the compliance subpersonality is looking out there to find the rules. So again, coming back to what Georgina said before, because if I know all the rules, then I can be perfect and I can't make a mistake. So this thing, whatever it is more likely to work out. The perfectionist subpersonality, again, is a hard taskmaster, but what a great thing to have, because it's saying, oh, you could do that better. You still haven't double checked that. You need to go back and double check and make sure you made no mistakes. And okay, well, that's still not good enough. I need to get more research on that area, etc., etc., etc. And of course, we can see it under the line. What they're trying to avoid is the vulnerable subpersonality, which is they're afraid of making a mistake. So if I can get all this right and perfect, then that's going to be successful, and then means that I haven't made a mistake. If a evaluator feels like they've made a mistake, they're going to feel shame and guilt and all those types of emotions. Georgina, we sort of covered a lot of these off, so you can probably whip through these quite fast. So investment strength.
The investment strength. Yeah, their ability to follow an investment plan to the letter, they're never going to deviate from that. It's too much a part of who they are and tied into their safety. They're going to analyze the data. They're going to look for facts. They're going to be researchers. They are precise. They're very careful, detail-oriented, and accurate. They'll double check and triple check accuracy. They love studying and gaining knowledge. They want to be the expert because they feel it's their responsibility to make sure that things are done perfectly. And anyone that they're involved with, they're going to have that expectation that they will be perfect. And if they're not, the evaluator is going to have that information as a safety net just to make sure that things are going to go the way that they need to. And so as a result of that, they have an ability to make very clear, rational, and unemotional decisions. Again, not people-oriented, task-oriented, information, fact-finding, rational decisions.
Right. Thanks, Georgina. And the last one, it can fail to pull the trigger by spending too much time trying to research even more evidence, facts, details to support you in the decision-making process. So what we call paralysis by analysis. So what we'll see often with evaluator investors or evaluator business people, let's sometimes perfect's not perfect enough. What do I mean by that? Okay, so you've done your risk analysis, you've done your SWOT analysis, and you can see that there's some risk. Let's just say that risk is at 10%. The Trailblazer might go, okay, well, I'm willing to run with that. The evaluator might go, okay, well, that's 10% risk. That's still too much. And there'll be a lot of emphasis to get more research. But everyone knows sometimes, let's just take area analysis. So if we look at a particular area and we can see that the forecast is that there's going to be capital growth in that area, it's still an assumption. There's lots of research behind it. And the evaluator knows that. Okay? The evaluator knows that. So the evaluator will often not trust information. And so they'll research and dig for more and more and more information. And what can that lead to, Georgina?
As you said, paralysis by analysis. They just won't pull the trigger because there's always going to be somewhere else. And, evaluators absolutely love the internet and Google because they have easier access to information than they ever had in the past. So it's much easier for an evaluator to get caught up in the analysis side of things because there is access to so much information.
Thank you, Georgina. So potential areas of improvement. Again, potentially uncomfortable with networking, pulling people deals together. So some of the strong and evaluators, Georgina said before, they can often not have a lot of personal skills. So someone like Georgina, she's fortunate in the sense that she's got a strong evaluator, strong motivator, so she can build relationships really quickly and understand how people feel. But then she's got the strong analytical part, which is tied to the evaluator. And of course, the deep fear of making a mistake drives an almost obsessive desire for more facts and details that has to be sort of monitored. As I said before, I have a work on that I'll probably always have, which is, Perry, have you double checked this? Have you done SWOT analysis? Have you thought this through from a long-term perspective? So you can see that would be a work on that I would have as a Trailblazer motivator. An evaluator would go, okay, am I just afraid of taking risks? Am I spending too much time researching something that there's no final answer to? So they're the types of double checks that we do when we're working on the challenges and weaknesses that we have within our own profiles as investors.
Yeah, and with evaluators, Perry, because I have a strong evaluator, it's always important to be able to set time limits. Time constraints can often help an evaluator because you can't evaluate if you've got a time limit. You set that for yourself, and then whatever information you have at that point in time, that's when you need to make the decision. So there are workarounds for evaluators as well, and understanding the boundaries around time spent in research is one of the key factors.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you all got a lot from today, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks, Georgina.
Great. Thanks, Perry. See you next time.